So, I don't like to call myself a creator. Part of it is that the word has become so tightly connected with content nowadays. Now, that isn't to say that I don't make content myself. I mean, I'm doing that literally right now. But it's not that I intended or even ever really wanted to. And at the end of the day, what I really want to do, what I feel like I do, is create. I create art, create crafts, create creations. Maybe they can be categorized under the umbrella of content, but to me, the word really takes the humanity out of it. The reason I create is not to make content. I create because I want to, because I need to. I can't imagine not creating. I can't imagine a life where I'm not creating art. And maybe I'm being a little bit pedantic about the terminology, but like with many other things, I feel like the words we use can actually be very important. I think they actually hold a lot more weight than sometimes we even recognize. So the word creator feels very mechanical to me. It makes me picture a machine that pumps out whatever thing it's intended to, whether that's doohickeys, widgets, or in this case, content. And maybe this is just me, but it kind of feels like this stems back to the whole industrialization and commercialization that society has pushed for so many years. It doesn't matter what you make, as long as you make lots of it and fast and cheap. But that's not what art is about, at least not to me. Art is slow. Art is intentional. And it shouldn't be cheap, but that's probably another conversation for another day. And of course, art could be pumped out quickly, but at what cost? The cost of quality? The cost of quality? The cost of uniqueness and individuality? More like all of the above. And all you really need to do to get an example of what a world where art is commoditized looks like, just take a look at the whole AI quote-unquote art hellscape. And do not get me wrong, this is not a rant about whether or not AI art is valid or not, which it isn't, by the way, but it's kind of the culmination of what the commoditization, but it really is a great example of the culmination of what the commoditization of art has led to. Certain people wanted art and they wanted it fast and cheap, so they turned to a literal machine that outputs quote-unquote art for them. And I'm not going to sit here on a high horse saying that we all need to do everything from scratch. I mean, I'm not saying that, I'm sure as hell not saying that we all need to grow and mill our own wheat in order to make flour for the bread that we then bake and then we eat it. Some things like that have been mechanized and automated for a very good reason, because they are labor intensive and time intensive. And therefore costly, because of course in capitalism everything comes down to money. But without that time constraint and without any financial constraints, would we still be wanting to look at mechanizing art? Think of all the people who actually got into bread baking, from sourdough starters that they actually fed and cultivated over days and weeks and sometimes even months. And some of them even gave them cute little pet names because they were pretty much their pets at that point in time. And despite the initial issues during the lockdown, it wasn't like it was impossible to go and buy bread. And yet people still chose not only to learn, but to take the time and effort into learning, then baking their own bread. And this took so many hours of trial and error as well. It wasn't like they just decided to bake bread one day and then all of a sudden they were just masters at making bread. I know so many people who spent many, many days eating flat loaves of bread because it just took them that long in order to actually get to a point where they were any good at it. We don't call these people bread creators, though, do we? I mean, we'd probably call them bakers, or possibly even artisans. Artisan? I never know how to pronounce that. Artisanal bread really does sound a lot better to me than created bread. I mean, maybe that's just me. And at the end of the day, sure, it's just me being pedantic and nitpicky about the way that the word creator is being used. I'm not here to police how that word is used either. I mean, I don't have that power, nor would I ever want to. And even if I did, I would definitely not want to use it. All I'm saying here is that I don't feel like a creator, despite the fact that I do create. I'm a creative, maybe even an artisan, depending on what it is that I'm creating. But most importantly, I'm an artist. I'm not afraid to put in the time because this is what I love to do. And of course, there are times where I wish that I could be faster at finishing a piece of art, but I know that it doesn't come down to finding shortcuts. The only real shortcut at the end of the day is putting in the time, putting in the practice, and I really wouldn't have it any other way.